Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to promote positive change through our No to Domestic Violence ceremony, encouraging men, women, and youth to stand up against domestic violence in the Georges River community. My name is Kirsten Walsh, and I am very pleased to be your MC for today. This ceremony will be recorded and posted on the Council's YouTube channel, website, and social media for all members of the public to view. Today's special guests, and I'd like to give them a warm welcome. We have Mayor Councillor Kevin Green, Councillor Nancy Lieu, Councillor Colleen Symington, Councillor Nick Catras, Councillor Con Hindi, Councillor Vince Badalati, Georges River Council General Manager Gail Connolly, Aboriginal Elder Mr Brendan Kieran, and Mrs Rhonda Wainwright. To ensure we are all COVID safe, could I please ask that you remain in your seats for the duration of the ceremony, please? And there is a hand sanitising station over to the side and a QR code as well. I'd now like to welcome Mr Brendan Kieran to give the welcome to country for today's special event.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank all the people, all the council members that are here today for attending. Domestic violence it's increasing. I do a little bit of work within the court systems, and when our courts have to close 2 days a week to specifically deal with domestic violence issues, there's a problem. And I think we need to, domestic violence doesn't discriminate. And as a community, I think we need to stand up and do a little bit more than what's already being done. My name's Brendan. I'm a cultural representative of Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council in Redfern. I'm here this morning to do a welcome to country. A little bit of my history. I was born at Crown Street, Surrey Hills, Crown Street Women's Hospital in 1971. That's the last time I ever saw my mother in that hospital. I'm the second generation that's been removed, and I'm one of 10 siblings that have been removed. I've lived my whole life in Sydney. I love Sydney. And I'm here today to, as I said, to welcome everyone onto country. The country that we're on today is Bidjigal and Kogarah land. It's part of one of the 29 language groups that make up the Eora Nation. And in between those boundaries, the boundaries are the three most beautiful rivers in the world. You've got the Hawkesbury River, the Nepean River, and the Georges River. And in between those boundaries are the 29 language groups. And the language group and the clan we're on today is Kogarah and Bidjigal. So on behalf of Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council, on behalf of its members, the board, and myself as an Aboriginal person, being privileged to welcome people to country. 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had a welcome to country or a smoking ceremony. And I know for a fact 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had a welcome to country done by someone as good looking as myself. So on behalf of Metro and myself, I'd like to welcome everyone here. Part of my welcome is also playing this instrument. Very quickly, a lot of you know this instrument as a didgeridoo. This is not called a didgeridoo. A didgeridoo is a yidiki. This is called a yidiki. A didgeridoo is a yidiki that's not played traditionally. Yidiki in my father's language means voice, song. So when we play the yidiki, we just don't blow it and make a noise. We sing through it while we play. It's said that when the first white man came here, he heard a song, and that song was didgeridoo, didgeridoo, didgeridoo. It sounded a lot like this. Didgeridoo, didgeridoo, and that's how it got its name, didgeridoo. He was very smart, that white fella, because then he looked at these two things and he said, I know what they're called. They're called tapping sticks. This is called bilma, the sticks, male and female sticks. Only special wood we use for our bilma. So just to finish off my welcome, I'd like to play a welcome song, just again to welcome everyone here.
Thank you, Mr. Kieran. Well, I'd now like to invite the Mayor of Georges River Council, Councillor Kevin Green, to officially commemorate today's No to Domestic Violence ceremony. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to also pay my respects to the Bidigal people of the Eora Nation and thank them for their custodianship of the land where we gather here this morning. And that custodianship has, of course, lasted for tens of thousands of years. And as I say, we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And again, thank you, Brendan, for your welcome. I might suggest after your comments, though, that I think I should buy you a mirror because in the good look stakes, you and I are probably equal there. So I keep reminding myself when I look in the mirror each morning. But no, you've, as yet again, you've done a fantastic welcome, and we do appreciate your skill and talent in the way you go about doing that. So sincere thanks for your involvement with this ceremony. I was thinking this morning that this Sunday my mother would have been 87 years old. Sadly, she passed away a number of years ago. And you'd say, well, what relevance does that have to what we're here gathered today? Well, I was blessed because my mother and father were wonderful parents, and I benefited from their love and care and their knowledge. Sadly, my father died just before I would have turned 18, but my mother and father had a wonderful relationship, and as I say, I benefited greatly from that. Sadly, there are children in our community, children throughout New South Wales, Australia, and tragically the world, who don't have that advantage. And they don't have that advantage because the relationships in the households in which they're being brought up have, in fact, fallen apart. And in many cases, they have indeed turned to violent relationships. And that is a great tragedy for everyone, for the males, the females, indeed the children in those households, those homes. And today, we as a community come out and say we abhor, we are totally against domestic violence because of the impacts that has, sadly, on so many, and particularly young people in our community. Because, again, tragically, violence itself continues to perpetuate itself. So as a community today, and I'm pleased to be joined with my fellow councillors, Councillor Badalati, Councillor Symington, Councillor Catras, Councillor Hindi and Councillor Lieu, as well as our senior staff, the General Manager Gail Conley and Rebecca's team, the Community and Culture team. We, as representatives of our community, are saying most strongly we need to work together to do our best to, one, eradicate violence in any shape, but most significantly today, to eradicate violence that happens within our homes and our households. Because of the impact that that has, not just today, not tomorrow, but for years to come on the lives of so many. We can only hope that, like myself, and I'm sure each of you, that children have the advantage of being brought up in loving, caring households, and also in a caring community that puts the message out there very strongly that domestic violence in any shape will not be accepted. Because, and I'm sure Councillor Symington will comment on this shortly, domestic violence itself comes in many forms. That violence is not necessarily just physical. So when we see people who are victims, people who need our support, we need to put our hands up and state categorically that we do not wish to see violence of any form in our community, as I say, in our households, and more importantly, in a word that I believe has even greater significance, and that's in our homes. So again, on behalf of the Georges River community, I thank those who are attending this ceremony physically, those who are attending it virtually, but please take away the message: we must continue to work together as a community to eradicate domestic violence. Thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Green. That's a very important message. I would now like to invite Councillor Colleen Symington to share a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and for those who will be watching on Council's YouTube channel. Today is an extremely important moment as we stand united to fight to end domestic violence and coercive control, otherwise known as intimate terrorism, in our community. This is a deeply personal issue for me, as my childhood and subsequent adult life have been impacted by domestic abuse that took place in our family home, which is supposed to be my sanctuary. You may have noticed the pledges around the town square to end domestic violence in our community. These pledges have been written by members of our community in an effort to show their support and speak out against domestic violence. If you'd like to make a pledge today, please see one of our event staff, or make a digital pledge by scanning the QR code which is on your seat. Make no mistake, domestic violence is a significant national health and welfare issue. I actually think it's the biggest safety issue that we face in our country. I'd like to share now with you some frightening family and domestic violence statistics. Australia-wide, between 2018 and 19, there were 125 victims of homicide from family and domestic violence in Australia, 8,985 victims of sexual assault in family and domestic violence cases. In New South Wales in 2019, there were 38 victims of homicide from family and domestic violence, 3,533 victims of sexual assault in family and domestic cases. In our own St George area, the number of incidences of domestic violence in the St George River Council local government area are as follows: 2015-16, 431, 16-17, 442, 2017-18, 439, 2019-20, 491, and that doesn't even capture the last half of the influence of the pandemic. They are increasing, and I've been told that's quite a significant amount of cases. This is a total of 2,237 reported instances of domestic violence in our local government area. They're the only ones that were reported. There are some that are never reported. They happen in silence. We don't know about them. I'm so proud to announce that Georges River Council and the St George Domestic Violence Committee have come together to launch a pocket guide. And this is the pocket guide. It's so ingenious. It fits the brief so well, and I'm proud of all the staff that came up with this pocket guide. It's actually to show members of our community what relationships should be, what domestic abuse is, and more importantly, what coercive control is. And it also has contact information so people can get the support that they need. It is to inform the public of signs of coercive control and abuse, and it provides the support services to anyone who has experienced domestic abuse. Remembering Hannah Clark, who was incinerated along with her 3 children in February this year, she didn't think she was a victim of domestic violence because she wasn't physically hurt. The first and last act of violence by her husband was to meticulously plan her death, and that's what happens often in coercive control cases. There is no physical violence. It's emotional, it's financial, it's sexual, or it's, I'm going to hurt the children if you don't do this. So this is why we need to raise this awareness so people can realise they actually are victims of coercive control. It's insidious, and it will keep going if the awareness is not raised. And now these pocket guides are available to all members of the community and be picked up from the council service centres in Hurstville and Kogarah, or online at the council's website. Council will also be investigating the establishment of a safe room within the Hurstville precinct in order for domestic abuse victims to seek assistance discreetly without fear being found out by the perpetrators. This safe room no one will know about, you won't be able to see where it is, but they will be able to go and seek assistance. For domestic abuse to end, we need significant funds allocated by governments to early education to stamp out the intergenerational abuse cycle. Most importantly, we need the criminalisation of coercive control, and there's currently a private member's bill in the floor of the Legislative Assembly of New South Wales. It's waiting to be debated. Now, often private members' bills are voted down by governments, but I hope that they take the information in this bill and come back with their own legislation and criminalise coercive control, because the gold standard has been set in Scotland and it has been very successful. Lots of funds put into the implementation and re-education of police and the judiciary. So we can do it, and I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I look forward to reading the pledges. But please remember that to end this blight on our society, we must keep advocating for real change. We just don't do it once a year. We keep advocating, calling it out, and saying to government, we want real change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Symington, for your powerful words and introducing the Pocket Guide to Relationships, Domestic Abuse and Coercive Control. Please see our event staff at the end of today's ceremony if you would like a copy. I'd now like to invite Rhonda Wainwright to share her story in honour of her mother, Violet.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rhonda Wainwright. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. In particular, my mum was a victim. We grew up in Mortdale from the 1940s onwards. Mum had 12 children. I'm number 9. He's 5. I can hardly recall peace and security growing up, as there was a lot of yelling, throwing and hurting. What I do recall vividly is hiding under our beds or walking the streets at night, or sleep on church pews or on our school verandas and elsewhere. Dad was terrifying after he'd come home from the pub, 6 o'clock swill they called it. He was a regular at Mortdale pub. He'd come home expecting dinner to be perfect, and if it wasn't, he'd throw it against a wall and we'd all duck. We've got great reflexes, especially in cricket. Once he threw the fridge over. He'd chase Mum around the house with an iron bar and bash her bedroom door. The indents were still there when we had to sell Mum's house in 2008. There are 6 boys and 6 girls in our family. Sadly, we lost a brother in 2019. He was number 8, Griffey. Our eldest sibling and sister, Connie, her husband threw Dad out of the house and he was told never to return, but he did. He tried to set fire to our house, but a younger brother, Brett, can't remember which number he is, 10. But our younger brother, Brett, kept blowing up the match. We lived finally in peace in our own home, which Mum really wanted to save for us all, which she did, and that was a fight. So we lived in peace in our own house once she left for good, and it was difficult for Mum raising us, clothes, food, school, etc. There was not a lot of assistance in those days, except the baker and the local fruit guy. She'd get credit and she'd always pay it back. Domestic violence has left our family scarred, but Mum made us tough and taught us to be decent human beings, of which I'm proud. I've been a nurse for 40 years and I'm still doing a bit of COVID stuff. He's an accountant.
Don't hold against me.
She died suddenly in 2008 with not one of us by her side. We idolised our mum and miss her very much. In her twilight years, she did enjoy life, from many travels to part-time acting and singing, which she loved. The stats of domestic violence is appalling. As you have spoken, on average, 1 woman a week is killed by her partner. I find that just unacceptable. We cannot let women and children live in fear in their own homes or living out of their cars because of this insidious issue. Thank you for listening and supporting this important cause. We pray that one day we can all live in peace and harmony. I am Rhonda McLaren, one of 12, Rusty McLaren. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you, Rhonda, and to Rusty for sharing your story. That was wonderful. We really appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that does bring us to the end of today's event. In a moment, I would like to invite you all to take a photo with the Mayor, our local celebrity. But I'd first like to thank everybody who took part in today's event, either in person or those viewing on the Council's YouTube channel. Please remember that if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, you are not alone and there is always support. Thank you.